Thank you, Chris. Boroda Abatawa, good morning, Swansea. I used to live in Swansea for many years, so very nice to always be invited back. So I'm going to talk to you this morning, as Chris said, about our local places for nature grants. And if Chris will flick the first slide, please. Just as an overview to start then, we have available grants of between £10,000 to £250,000 for projects that will acquire, restore, and or enhance nature that can be seen from your doorstep. It's quite a straightforward process for applying, and certainly between £10,000 and £100,000. We do have a small number of grants available above that amount, but we always ask you to talk to us first about your ideas if you're going to make a large application. What's great about this fund is we will award 100% of the funding, so you don't require any match funding. And the people who can apply is any non-for-profit organisation. So this could be a local authority, it could be a public body, or it could be a community organisation, as long as it's constituted and has a bank account. Next slide, Chris, please. Chris has already mentioned this is joint funding between the National Lottery Heritage Fund and Welsh Government, and it makes a contribution to Welsh Government's environmental growth plan. We are particularly looking to fund projects in areas of deprivation in urban and peri-urban areas, that's semi-urban areas. And one of the reasons for contacting us first is that we can provide you with advice. We have pre-application advice available, and we have quite a quick turnover on this fund, so that when you apply, you'll have your decision within 8 weeks. Next slide, please, Chris. Okay, so the sorts of things that we fund then, and the whole purpose of this fund is to fund, as I said, in urban areas, in peri-urban areas. So they're possibly areas that aren't nature areas already, or if they are, they need work done on them. Because the idea is to fund work, projects where people live, where people work, where people study, where people stand and wait for a bus when they travel. And Welsh Government are particularly interested in achieving 3 things from projects. One is to stop things, so it could be stopping using pesticides, it could be stopping traditional mowing practices, it could be around stopping littering in an area. Very important part is, of course, growing. So this is about growing new things, pollinators, installing community orchards, setting up allotments, creating much better places for wildlife to grow. And then it's also about changing. So it's changing practices. So again, changing the mowing practices, could be encouraging people to walk, to cycle, and to do the right things for the environment as well. So there's a modest list of about 9 things, I think, on our website, and you must include one of these things in your application. Next slide, Chris. Okay, so who can apply? I said it's pretty open to lots of organisations. So typically we fund community groups, allotment societies, or community orchard organisations. We can fund friends of organisations, so parks, hospitals, and so on. We can fund housing associations, schools is a possibility, local nature partnerships, and we work closely with all the local nature partnerships across Wales, and also registered charities as well. You don't need to be a registered charity to apply. Next slide, please, Chris. And where can projects be based? Well, I gave you a slight overview there around that we're particularly looking to fund projects in urban areas, peri-urban areas, and areas of deprivation. And we look specifically at the Wales Index of Multiple Deprivation, which you can find on the gov.wales website. So if you are applying for a project, you need to tell us exactly where it is and the area that you would be covering. You can check against the WIMD yourselves, or we would check that for you. But for example, we wouldn't necessarily fund a project in an area that wasn't defined as deprived in terms of overall and physical condition. However, if organisations are working with underrepresented groups, then that is a possible route for funding as well. But do check that out when you're thinking of applying. Next slide, Chris, please. Okay, so the fund is pretty much a capital fund. And when we mean capital, we mean things that invest in the growth of nature. So it could be buying a piece of land. It could, on some small occasions, be buying or restoring buildings, although we want to emphasize this is not a buildings acquisition fund, and we may only do that in some circumstances. Our colleagues in the National Lottery Heritage Fund have other programs that may be more suitable if you're looking at working on buildings. It would be things that would increase, improve and restore habitat. So it could be planting flowers, shrubs, hedgerows, trees. It could be buying machinery, and includes the fuel for the machinery as well. And indeed, we've worked with a number of local authorities, and town councils, to buy mowers so they can change their mowing regimes. That is eligible under this funding. It's about investing in people. So training, skill sharing is possible, and anything really that changes the management of the piece of land. So training operatives to use tools, to use machinery and skills is covered by the capital part of the fund. Next slide, Chris, please. There is, I should mention there is a small amount of money that can be spent on what we call revenue, so activities, because one of the things around this fund is that it isn't just about the nature. The nature is, of course, the most important thing, but also people are important as well. And that's why it's great to see all of you today. It's about community groups that are working with the community, because there'll need to be some community involvement in it. And the fund can also fund things like travel expenses, launch events, communications and things like that. There's a small amount of money that can be used for that. So in terms of the things that we're hoping to achieve through this fund, and that we want you to put in your applications, are small things that would make a really big difference locally. So it's things like increasing allotments. We know many are closing. There's a shortage around, particularly being identified over the last year as being of interest to communities. We really want to support community growing and community orchards as well. This fund can fund some tree planting, although Chris will talk about our Community Woodlands Fund, which is more appropriate for large-scale tree planting. But we would plant, help you plant tiny forests, street trees. You can apply for water fountains to increase drinking water available publicly and reducing plastic use. We want to fund flower-rich meadows, so creating new meadows, particularly on sloping land, and as I mentioned before, changing mowing practices too. Encouraging pollinators, encouraging bees and others on the land, and reducing pesticide use to help that. And also around choosing your compost wisely, so avoiding peat-free compost. All is choosing native species, trying to avoid non-native species and trying to remove those as well. And it's really important for us that whatever you buy or wherever you go to source materials, that you try and use local sourced materials and local companies as well, because it's local places for nature, and that's really important in this fund too. Next slide, Chris. Some other things that you can do and can be funded are fencing to protect nature areas. We can pay for the clearing of a site, including the cost of labour to do that. Already mentioned there around removing invasive species and replacing with more beneficial native species. Anything really that can bring the site back into use. And if you need to have a litter clearing or take in contamination, maybe digging concrete out of an old canal or something, that's possible to be funded as well. But one thing that's really important is that this fund is for a year, so it's for 12 months, and you must create a management plan for the ongoing management of the site, because after 12 months, we can't pay for any further maintenance, and you wouldn't necessarily be able to pick up a grant straight away. So it's important that you think beyond the 12 months for your project. Next slide, Chris, please. Okay, I touched on a little bit there earlier on, but important to note that although this is primarily a capital grant scheme, and for around 85% of the grant or more, you can spend up to 15% on activity costs to involve more people in heritage and a wider range of people in heritage. That's one of the reasons why the National Lottery Heritage Fund is involved in this. Obviously, we love nature and landscapes, and nature is really important to the fund. But we're also keen to get more people involved in heritage, and in this case, natural heritage. So if you are thinking of trying to work with, as I mentioned before, underrepresented groups, new people who in your area is not engaging with heritage, who might welcome the opportunity to take part in a project, you can claim 15% of costs for expenses to involve people, engage people, train people, get people volunteering on your project. Everything that you do should be bilingual, so it's really important that if anything is produced, it should be in both Welsh and English, and both languages should have equal precedence. And you can claim, if you need any translation costs, that's eligible in the budget as well. What we ask is that whatever you do, if you produce anything or you advertise the project, that you acknowledge the funding of both Welsh Government and the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and you follow the guidelines published by both organisations. That sounds complicated, but it is really quite straightforward. If you have a great project in mind and you're committed to restoring nature in the area, there's a good chance that your project will be eligible. Next slide, Chris. And to see if your project is eligible, this is how you apply. Have a look at our website, first of all, which is heritagefund.org.uk. And if you click on at the moment, you should see 3 funds, I think, that are open. And all of those funds are available in Wales. You don't have to go onto the Wales page, just go onto the main page, because all 3 funds are available in Wales. Local Places for Nature is there. If you click on, you'll find some guidance about applying for National Lottery Heritage Fund projects, and also specifically this particular scheme. You can register on our portal, and if you complete a project inquiry form, that really is just for you to tell us your ideas, what you want to do, who you want to work with, where you want to work, and a rough idea of your budget and what you're going to ask us for. We'll then come back to you with some comments to help you make the best application. So you can apply straight away, but we would advise completing the project inquiry form first, so that we can help you on your way. And you know, if there's anything there that perhaps isn't eligible or that you're not sure about, you have the opportunity to ask us through that process. And then it's quite a quick decision, and you'll receive your decision within 8 weeks. I mentioned before, it's quite a straightforward process to apply, but if you are applying for a bigger grant, particularly over 100,000, we do advise you to talk into us first, and our website, email address and phone number will appear shortly. But just remember, read the guidance very carefully. It does look a bit unwieldy first, but it's quite straightforward when you start to read it. If you apply with a particular title, if you add hashtag nature, the Welsh word, to it, it'll make sure it comes straight through to Chris or myself, so that we can help you with any questions that you have. And then I think it's the last slide to come, and it's just telling you where to find that more information and to help you encourage wildlife like these on the screen. So have a look at heritagefund.org.uk, give us an email at nature@heritagefund.org.uk, or you can phone us on 029 2105 4069.